and
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
see my
So
address.
remember my face.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Bill Owens. I'm from California, born and raised there. As soon as the digital camera came out, I threw my other cameras away. I put them under the bed, never to look at them again, because I could be sitting there and people can walk by and I can reach over and touch my digital camera. It comes on, and as the people walk by, I go click and put the camera down again. So it's non-imposive, where before I'm like this, focusing in your face and hiding behind the camera. With my digital camera, click, and I got the image. And plus, it's on a computer, and I can take a photograph of you, for example. I can have it up into the sky and around the world in 0.2 of a second. Live, film. And that's really, to me, is quite amazing that that's how much the world has changed. But the digital thing I'm totally in love with, because it opens up other books, other possibilities, and a more candid way of working. Because in the very beginning, when you had an 8x10 camera, it took you 2 hours to set the camera up and the lights up to make one picture. Big pain in the butt. Digital, click, I'm done. I'm out of here. I remember once they asked me to be the judge for the art exhibit, and you had these little cards, red, green, and blue, and you put the red on the best one and go around. I picked out my favorites. Then when there was 3 of us judges, when the other judges went away, I moved the cards around to put them all on my favorite photograph thing. Unfortunately, I bragged about doing that, so they were really mad at me for messing up their judging. But that's part of my deviance, I guess. My parents met in a little town called Livermore, outside of San Francisco. My dad came west during the Great Depression looking for work, and my mother came from Montana also looking for work. And they ended up in Livermore, where I was conceived. And it's now 84 years later, and I'm back in Livermore, ironically, because my first job out of college was at the Livermore Independent. So I'm back in the same town where my parents had met. So I thought that was very interesting to be back and have that kind of serendipity to go back to where your roots were. And my children were born there also, born in a neighborhood town. And so when I moved to Livermore, I worked as a newspaper photographer, taking photographs of everyday, ordinary situations for the newspaper. So I would do 6 to 10 assignments a day. But also I'm going through culture shock in that I'm married, I have a child, but there's no culture. I would look at the community and say, oh, there's no culture. It's just ticky-tacky houses all in a row. And people are not, you think of community, I don't know, through a community, through Lions Club, Rotary clubs, junior women's clubs. And I work for the newspaper, so I'm exposed to all that. And I said to myself, I'd like to document that and take photographs of the valley. Livermore, Pleasant, Dublin was three towns that my newspaper covered. So I was very familiar with every road, every high school, every city hall, every fire department. And so when I got ready to do this project, I made what's basically a mission statement. Here is my statement. Here's what I want to do. I want to document our society today. And I think really in the back of my mind, I really wanted to communicate about culture and what we are as a people. And this is universal, who we are as a people. We socialize, we have families, and we belong to a community. So that's why, like with Nordic Light, with this community, I love it because I'm with people who think like I think, who are interested in communication of who we are and what we're about. So I got a small grant, and I began photographing the valley. And again, I made a mission statement, and I made all these things I wanted to go photograph. I wanted to go photograph, these are mostly family, but in one of my other books, I'd photograph people going on vacation, people making a new lawn. I'd photograph dinner parties and just young people. And so I photographed all that, and you begin to compile it. And after a year, you have 500 prints in a box. And I knew then I had a book. And I had to go find a publisher, which took a long time. because publishing is very, very difficult to do because somebody has to spend $20,000 or $30,000 on you. And so eventually Rolling Stone magazine had a publishing division, and they published Suburbia. And it was a critical success, not financially, but critically successful in that my photographs ended up in Time magazine, New York Times. In galleries like this, I probably, in the last 50 years, had at least 50 to 60 exhibits of this size, where I'm part of a photographic community, and I show my photographs and I tell my story, because my story is really about me and what I think about and what I want to be part of. I want to be part of this. I know this young girl. I know those people. These people I know very, very well. I love the fact that they have a Santana poster. I photographed a Tupperware party at her house, and etc. So you begin to make relationships in the community that are very, very important, because so many people are just isolated in their house watching TV. And if you don't get out, you don't know anybody. You go to work, you come home, and that's it. So I'm very interested in building communities and organizations that drive the heart of what we are. So the book was published 72. Then I said, well, I'd like to do a book on groups of people: Rotary, Kiwanis, Masons, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. And I spent a year photographing that book. Then I said to myself, well, I want to photograph people working. So that's a good subject, because there's factories, and I would just drive along and I'd see a factory and I'd go knock on the door, go inside and see what they're doing, ask if I could take some photographs. We don't care, come on in. So I photographed a woman doing a wiring harness for the first computers. And I photographed a guy blowing glass. I photographed all kinds of really interesting factories. And even today, if I was to do another book, I'd want to do it like August Sanders did back in the 30s on working, because working is really the heart and soul of a family, is the man and a woman today in their job. Then when I'm done with that project, I said, well, I've done people and groups. I've done working. I should really do a book on leisure, because we all work so we can go play. And so what is playing today? It's boating. It's pleasure, going for a drive in the car. It's belonging to civic groups. There's so many things today that are leisure time activity, from playing cards with your friends to drinking beer. My leisure time is to meet a buddy of mine down at the local pub and have a pint of beer. We just sit there and just talk about nothing, and then we leave. But that's our community, is 2 or 3 of us who drink beer on a Thursday afternoon to get together to talk. So I finished with that book. Let's see. The leisure thing also is a book that could be like the working book, really expanded into what leisure is, because leisure, tourism, for example, is the biggest industry in the world. And when the pandemic hit, tourism industry fell apart. There's no more, like in this town, there's no more cruise ships out there as there was 2.5 years ago. And so going on a cruise ship is a leisure time activity. You eat good food, you do nothing, you look at the scenery. And I love to do leisure. My leisure is usually sitting on the sofa and daydreaming. And I'm still do a lot of daydreaming, as I did as a young boy. I'm raised on a farm. I didn't have lots of things, so you just daydream, climb trees, throw rocks, chase cows, or whatever else I wanted to do. So you put it all together as a body of work of what a society is about. And I know that when people move into a community, especially our community, there's a knock at the door, and the Chamber of Commerce will present a basket with a bottle of wine and flowers for people to have, welcoming them to the community. And they're usually in pretty big shock that somebody came to the door after they moved on to say, welcome to the community. So the idea of doing this kind of project was inspired by other documentary photographers. So I love my focus is documentary, and that's what I've studied, and that's what I'm interested in, to really try to get the big picture of what a community is, and that's from the aerial view of where the highways are, city parks, the historical societies. I always love the historical society. Matter of fact, I used to belong to the historical society in Livermore, and there's only about 4 or 5 people would come, and I'd look across the hall, and the room is packed with people, fly fishermen. More people go to the fly fishing club than to the historical club. So I realized I should photograph the fly club. But also in those days, there was another club there with a bunch of dorky guys, and it was a computer club. I wouldn't have anything to do with that group of people. So the people get together to talk, and that was before Apple was even born, that the first computers came out, and people knew that the computer was going to, somehow knew that the computer was going to change the world. Not in my eyes. I couldn't see the computer. I had a typewriter, and the typewriter works. I knew Mikkel and his whole family, as a matter of fact, in Livermore, because I worked for the newspaper, and I'm a photographer, so he was a photographer, but he had the most interesting job. Every summer he went to the county fair and worked in a photo booth. And the photo booth was about this big. And people would come in and they'd pay like $2, and they would pose like this, and Mikkel would take their photograph and disappear into another room, develop the film in 90-degree W6 developer, fix it, make a print, and while it was wet, hang it out, and the people would come back and pick it up within 5 minutes. And he made thousands of photographs, and he even did a book. And I thought, this is really, again, I love the county fair, because you go to see animals, you see people, you have hot dogs, you have the whole community coming together for horse racing. Well, I would never go to horse racing, but there they are. People want to get together to bet on horses. So good for them. Have fun. I usually want to just sit in the park and drink beer. I like to go to the flower exhibit. I like to, I like to look at the exhibits for gardening, but also because I'm raised on a farm, I want to go look at the cows and the pigs. And even now today, they have pig races. They line up about 5 or 6 pigs and race them around a corner. Go look at the fancy chickens. Go to the historical booth to look at the different old steam engines and boilers and all that kind of stuff. So the county fair is really a great joy, and I enjoy going because, again, the county fair goes back in the history of a community once a year to get together, to sell, to buy, to socialize. There's a community center where people come, groups come and sing. They do magic tricks, all kinds of things happen. And there's photo exhibits too. So to have an opportunity to come to Nordic Light to tell my story is very important to me, because I've done this over and over again. I've done it in Spain. I've done it in England a number of times. I've talked across the United States at university, camera clubs, all kinds of groups to come and, to tell your story. And I have great pride in telling my story over and over again, because it's who I am and how I saw the world as a documentary photographer. So I look at photography as a big pie, and I have a little slice. And my little slice is probably the backbone of photography, because the very first photographers were documentary people photographing on the streets. And the pie has now expanded to all kinds of art and books and digital. And the pie has grown because of the digital revolution to a huge pie. And there's something for everybody. And a lot of people who are just like, look at a camera, and like I'm self-taught. I look at a camera and say, well, what's this do? And just start playing with the buttons, or I have to go back to the camera store. What's this do? And try to figure out how a camera works. I usually don't go to camera clubs and socialize there. I had a wife and children and a job, so I don't have time to go to too many events like that. I would usually go to a home brewing club because I like to talk about beer and how to make beer. So I had a lot of friends in the home brewing club. And so I opened up the first brew pub in America called Buffalo Bill's Brewery because I was raised on a farm. I made beer on the farm, wine actually on the farm. And then when I went to college, I made beer in a bucket. And then later on in life, I bought used equipment and built a small brew pub. And today I own a still from China. It's about 5 plates, about that big, and I can make whiskey, gin, or whatever. So I just tell people, you might find my photography interesting, but you want to get to know me because I know how to make beer and I know how to make whiskey. So I have skills that transcend beyond just being a photographer and making prints. It's one thing interesting also is when I do these lectures, I was going to say this last night. Is there anybody in the room older than me? So raise your hand if you're over the age of 84. I can assure you there was no hand went up even in their, maybe 2 people were in their 80s or 70s or 80s. So the audience that I'm speaking to is the next generation of young people who discover photography. Because when you watch TV, that's a passive activity. When you buy a camera, now you have to go out in the world and make images. So it's really wonderful to see young people see in the camera, what can I can photograph on myself, my friends, and then the larger world. And that's what's good for young people. Then they have to buy books. And then they have to watch YouTube to figure out how to make film, how to make photography, how to also, eventually you have to take a course on how to publish a book. And you can't publish a book, learn how to do this. Most of my projects took 3 years, 1 year to shoot it, 1 year to plan it, 1 year to shoot it, and 1 year to mop it up and get it printed. But when you're done, you have to have other people involved in your project. You have to have an copy editor for the words. You have to have another editor to help you cut away the chaff and focus on the best part of the book. Then you have to have people printing the book, and then you're dealing with wholesalers and retailers and trying to get the book sold to the bigger community through bookstore chains and etc. Again, if you want to hit a solid wall, publish a book yourself and then try to find a commercial publisher who's going to spend $30,000 to put you in 5,000 bookstores across America. So today I'm really shocked when I go to a big bookstore to see, number one, the number of photography magazines used to be popular photography, modern photography, when my generation. Now there's at least 30 different magazines, all dealing with digital, from Photoshop all the way through to the documentary stuff. So it's really fun to see that part of the world grow. But I walk over and look at the photography section, and it was my idea. I wanted to photograph trees. I wanted to photograph all the most famous trees in the world, and there it is, a book, 365 trees. And this person photographed 365 trees, and you start going through the book, and it's absolutely fascinating. Then I found out another person's done a book on trees. So you can take a single subject. Matter of fact, I was up at Bud and looking at the rocks there in that town that came down on glaciers, and I was talking to a young girl last night and about these interesting rocks because they've traveled 1,000 miles on a glacier. She said, "Oh, that's a book." I said, "You stole that idea from me. I want credit." But even something that's so dumb as a rock can be a book. And it's the history and volcanic action and what's in that rock. And I noticed around Norway, very few homes are made of stone because the rocks here are not the kind of rocks that are easily chipped and shale and flattened, and you can stack them on top of each other. The rocks here are volcanic, and they don't break into nice little pieces to build homes. So most homes here are wooden. No, I don't know how many shows, but there's 5 galleries showing a large group of photographers, and they're looking at the world through certain eyes. When they come here, this is black and white. They haven't seen black and white because everybody shoots color. This is done in a very documentary focused on people. And they're very forward, straight shots, people looking into the camera, and it's a particular style. And so these photographers are probably in shock to think that I focused on just people and the lifestyle versus the photographers here, they're photographed everything, you know. And so I'm trying to bring the traditional way of doing photography back from the very beginning was documentary. A house, a tree, a road, and just straight photography. And I think that's what I'm about. Is I'm not trying to be. I don't call myself an artist. I think that's I'm a photographer. That's as far as I'll go. An artist is a different genre, a different ambition. I'm a photographer. I communicate to people about America and what we're about, and a lifestyle in America that's to a large part still exists today. But everywhere I travel, and around here, I see suburban homes. So I know when I go inside, there'll be Nintendo. I know there'll be Lego for the children. I open up the cabinet. They're going to have Wheaties and Cheerios there. There's going to be a lot of similarities in culture because of the supermarkets. So when I come here, the first place I want to go is to the mall, and I want to go to the supermarket to look at the food and to see what people are eating and buying. And there's a lot of similarities. Cooking style, of course, is different. But I think it's interesting to mix the cultures together, which we've done from the very beginning of mankind, is the first sailors going out, is to mix the culture up, and it makes for a lively society. No, it's very interesting about photographing the people in the book. I did a book on working. And as I do these books, I have people sign a release card. And so I have their name and address, in those days, just a phone number. And when I'm all done with the project, I would have a gallery show. And I would send out letters, because you didn't have email, letters to everybody, with an invitation to come on a Friday night to San Francisco to this gallery and see the photographs from this book. And out of 100 invitations that go out, only 2 people show up. One was a salesman for Levitt's Furniture, like a guy who works for a Kia salesman. And the other was a young lady who worked in a factory making plastic molds. So only 2 people had the curiosity to come and see my life, which is fine with me. But even when I did this stuff, if I went back to these people and said, here, I want to give you a photographic print, they're not so interested. People's lives are very, very full. And their idea of a portrait is they went to a studio and they stood there in their best clothes and had a wonderful portrait made. My photography, because it's documentary and more intimate, is not interesting to them at all. They want their idea of a photography exists in a studio. So as a documentary one, I'm just running around having fun. It's not a job to them. It makes them stop and look at their own lifestyle. So when people look at the book and they see just a couple of teenagers hanging out, they're not necessarily going to pick up a camera and take pictures of teenagers goofing off, but they're going to say, that's what we did. We just hung out. They're inspired by many things in life, movies, and I just know I'm part of that pie as a documentary, because the photography world is huge and encompasses all kinds of people and ideas, and I'm very happy to be part of that big pie, to communicate back to the people I know, the groups I know, Photo Central, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really exciting to come here and have shows. I've been in other shows in Spain, where 100 photographers have come together to have a big show. 1,000 people will come out in a month to go to these galleries and to take a look at ideas and discuss, and it's a solid community activity. Yeah, we're doing something that is accessible. I mean, everybody has a cell phone. You can take pictures on your cell phone, or you can buy a very expensive camera or whatever, but you have to stop and say, wait a minute, that's a photograph. And I'll be going somewhere with a friend of mine, and I'll stop and take a photograph, and they don't see the photograph. And I saw the photograph, so I beat them to the punch to make the photograph. But it's really, it's fun I shoot every day. There's not a day go by I don't take my camera out and make a small film, or look out the window. Yesterday morning, I'm looking out the window, and there's a skateboarder across the street in the rain with his yellow jacket on. And so I take a picture of the skateboarder, and then I turned around, and he disappeared. And I thought, damn it, he's gone. And I looked back, and 10 minutes later, he's back in the same spot. But why would a kid be out at 9 o'clock in the morning on his skateboard with a wheel on it, just having fun? And I'm sure when he meets other skateboarders, there's a community of skateboarders, and there's lots of books on skateboarding. Somebody bothered to show these guys do 360-degree flips on their skateboards. So there's every subject now is turned into a book practically. You name the subject. I mentioned rocks and trees. There's everything from drug addicts to modern day politics have been made into books. The books communicate, and a book is something you keep forever. You don't throw books away, not very easily. And I have too many books. I'm trying to throw them away, but I can't. So I try to sell them, and I only get pennies. But I don't care. I had my enjoyment. But you got to remember, in Italy, I had an exhibit in a bank. The bank had a second floor that wasn't being used, and the people there gave us the space. That meant 200 people came to that exhibit, and the bank's thinking, oh, these are all potential customers. See, so I really like it when you have that kind of involvement in the community. But sponsorships for photography are very, very important, because not only to make the prints, which is inexpensive to make, you can make the prints for a few dollars, but costs more to mount it on the framing and everything else, and it costs more to have the administrators organize it, take an inventory, send out the invitation, pull all the people together. It takes a staff full time to pull something out like that. It's just not me showing up and with a dozen prints that are nicely mounted. It's a whole organization that needs support from the community at large, and that's individuals all the way to larger corporations. Yeah, I try, but again, as a documentary photographer, it's been my discipline. It's also like a sociologist. I try to make the overview. I try to show the bridges coming into town, the tunnels, the downtown. The first place we went was to the mall, to grocery stores, to go get a business card made. You go to an industrial park, and I'm thinking to myself, if I was here as a photographer, I would pick out an industrial park with maybe 40 or 50 businesses and spend a year and document the whole park. All the buildings, just a straight shot of the building, then inside the secretaries, then inside the manufacturers, then outside the trucks coming and going, and really show what goes on in manufacturing in a community. That way I have a bite of it to let other photographers take the other bite of shooting the downtown or shooting parks and recreation or whatever. I can only do so much, and other photographers can take on their bite. But I like doing industrial area because the area is fixed and you're getting acquainted with those people and they're exposed to photography, and then they will come out and to your show because they're interested to realize you came into their business, took a picture, and now it's mounted up on a wall. It's something they never dreamed of that you found interesting. And their livelihood, of course, is interesting to them. But I just want people to come out and be aware it's a big world out there. Thank you very much.